Marvel's has been in the news quite a lot since its release. So unfortunately, we have a bit to talk about. Let me first express the caveat that this movie's not made for me. I'm a 26-year-old male. Okay, this movie is not made for me. But I am a Marvel fan, or at least I was. I was a fan of what Marvel once was. And I want to see a return to that. But today we're not going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about the Marvels. I'll tell you the pros and the cons. I'll try to do all that without spoiling it for you. And then at the end, I'll dive into what my personal review is and what I feel like a movie critic would review it as. So let's dive into it. Let's first start with the pros. Let's give the movie some props. And first, let's talk about some of the characters. The chemistry between the characters this time was, I actually think, very decent. The characters seemed to get along on set, so I'm sure it happened off set. It felt like they had built an actual relationship. On top of that, Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, is the most likable she's ever been in the Marvel universe. Now, Brie Larson has not been a popular face in the Marvel universe. Most people really dislike her, and I'm kind of one of them. But this movie redeemed her a little bit for me. She played phenomenal. She felt like she was a real person for once. And I don't think it's just growth in the universe of Marvel. I think it's just growth as an actress. I don't know if that's a hot take, but Brie Larson did good this time. Again, another character. There's a cat named Goose, who's a Flarkin, which is some alien cat. Let's just say Goose is phenomenal. He's one of the, I think, better parts of the movie. Every scene they're in is likable, funny. You know, I really enjoyed seeing Goose on the screen. Sound engineering was phenomenal. I saw it in the Regal experience. I don't know what else to call it. There's some scenes that were like seriously jarring because of how fantastic the sound engineering was. And I'll say that about most Marvel movies. I mean, they crush it in that department. Soundtrack wise, music wise, sound wise, they've got it on lock. This one's no different. And I think it's a very strong part of the movie. In certain scenes, I mean, it really brings you into it. I think, like most people, Kamala Khan, the 15-year-old girl in the movie, I was worried about her. I don't even think that's a hot take. I think everyone probably was. She crushed it. Every scene she was in was fantastic. She was funny, but not the cringe funny that I've been making jokes at Marvel's expense for quite a while. It was actual humor, and it was maybe because she's a 15-year-old girl and actually, you know, would actually talk like that, unlike how other Marvel characters talk nowadays. All that aside, she crushed it. I'm excited for her to do further work in the Marvel universe. She's got some talent and she knows what she's doing. Full respect to her. Crushed it. But unfortunately, it's time to turn to the cons. And I think there's a good list of them. One, CGI is decent in some parts of the movie. It's awful in others. You remember that scene in that one Thor movie that everyone ragged on where the kid's face was like a hologram and whatnot? Yeah, that's felt like half the movie, in all honesty. There's some really, really bad CGI. And that turned into what made me think that this movie felt like a TV show. It felt like a CW show. It's bad. It's bad. It was really, I mean, this is one of the weakest CGIs we've ever seen from Marvel, which to me is super polarizing when you see the trailer for that new Godzilla movie and the CGI looks better than real life. Whatever. It is what it is. Next on the list. Bad ad placement. Marvel makes a lot of money. People want their stuff in the movie. There were two egregious ones that stood out at me, mostly because I'm looking for things to critique and I'm looking at the movie as a whole, and it was annoying to me to see. I'm not going to shout them out because I'm not going to give them any credit because they got it in the Marvel movie. That stuff kind of frustrates me. It feels like it's getting more and more common and more egregious, and this one, while maybe not egregious, annoyed me. I have to say that I don't know if it's nepotism or what, but this villain was arguably the worst one I think we've ever had in the Marvel Universe. The character was bad, and I think the acting was bad. I don't know her name. She's Tom Hiddleston's wife. Tom Hiddleston is Loki. And I think it's actually both. I think she was a bad actress, and I think the character was just awful. Terribly written. Acting was just off. It all felt just bad. When she was on the screen, I was not having a good time. She also served like almost no purpose, it felt like. I mean, she was just there to push along a little plot. I hated it. I really think it has to be nepotism because I don't know this person, never seen them anywhere. This was bad. And again, this is another Marvel movie where the characters are just emotionally immature. It frustrates me to no avail that we have this subplot every time of there needs to be a conversation that happens, but we're too busy and we're also, not adults and can't have that conversation or can't be emotionally mature. It frustrates me. Okay. You can do it every once in a while. Every Marvel movie does it. This one's no different. Two adults can't have a conversation, make things awkward, adds a dumb subplot. It's frustrating, to say the least. Okay, now outside of the pros and cons, there's a little bit we do need to talk about. The Marvels had the worst opening weekend ever in Marvel history. And that's a lot. I mean, that's saying something. And to be fair, as I said earlier, this movie's not for me. And it's not for a majority of Marvel fans, right? Majority of Marvel fans are male. But I think this is just a worrying trend of Marvel's just going in the wrong direction. Sure, some movies have been good recently. But if you talk about the quality of films since Endgame, there's not much to write home about. Now, I will say Marvel's was better than some of them. Ant-Man Quantumania was awful, okay? That movie deserved to have a worse box office than the Marvels. The Marvels was just a bad time. There's also the SAG-AFTRA strike. They couldn't promote the movie. I do think Brie Larson, gets you a few extra $1 million. Sure, that still isn't going to make up for it being the worst performing Marvel movie, but it helps out a little bit, lessens the blow. I think it's this continuing lack of just good quality content from Marvel. And it's also this universe has expanded too much. They've stretched themselves too thin. There's no need to have 8 television shows and 4 movies a year. I concentrate on the quality. Go back to what Marvel was. If you go back and compare Iron Man 1 to any of the movies in the last 2 years, it's a stark difference. One, the humor nowadays, it's too much. Okay, and this movie, I think, actually nailed it. This movie actually had good humor because that's the type of movie it is. These other ones aren't. Stop making them like that. Okay, before this becomes me just ranting about Marvel, let's go ahead and give it a rating. Personally, I think this movie's really not that bad. It got a lot more hate than it deserved. I enjoyed it. There were funny parts. That all being said, it's probably a 7 for me. I would put it in the 6.5 to 7.5 range. Probably more of a how I feel on the day. But I did enjoy it overall. Characters were likable. The humor wasn't egregiously bad. Now, there are some bad scenes. Don't get me wrong, there's like 2 or 3 that are awful. But overall, I found myself enjoying the film a little bit more than I expected. So I think for that, I'm going to just give it that middle ground of like a 7. It's better than average, and it's definitely better than some of the past Marvel movies. But as a movie critic, this movie's a whole failure. Movie critically, I'm saying 4, maybe 4.5. Again, I think just some things are way off on the film that really ruin it. Again, being said though, it's still better than Ant-Man Quantumania. I think this Marvel's movie is a little bit of an outlier in its performance. Again, there's definitely some contributing factors to it, and it should have done better than it did. And it might still have a decent run. I mean, we'll see how long it stays out. But the movie's gotten a lot more hate than it deserves. Movie was fine. The characters are fine. It's just an average Marvel movie, which is kind of saying a lot about Marvel and what they've become recently.